record this session. Yeah. Hello.
Hey there. Is my cam on? Can you see me?
Your cam is not on yet. No. Now I can see you. Very good. Yeah. So much better now. Good.
Yeah, and we got one here.
Yeah.
We text Greg. Greg was connecting. Let me just text him.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Ricardo. Hello. Ricardo, can you hear us? Or me? Maybe, maybe not.
The audio is voice over IP, so you might have to switch to mic and speakers instead of telephone.
I think you already switched. It's like that little symbol there means that it's over voice over IP, but maybe it's then in the audio settings. So there are also audio settings where you can select which microphone and speakers are going to be used. So it's in GoToMeeting preferences or on a Mac, and I don't really know how it's called on a PC. Lida is coming. I'm sure it's now also possible to do the same thing. I'm also doing a recording right now of the session. This means I'm going to provide that to Dan and Lida further on. If you have any further questions, you can direct it, of course, to Dan or Lida, or also to me. I think most of you already also know me. But still really quick introduction. Oh, we are missing Greg Irwin, Lida is saying. Dan, did you send it to Greg also? Okay.
Yes, I texted him and emailed him.
Okay. Yeah. So, just to the quick overview of rules, how we're gonna do this today. Since we are a fairly small group, feel free to also ask questions in between. and Dan will interrupt me when he reads that you have a chat message there and a question. But otherwise, we also can add on a little bit of time in the end if you have questions after the presentation itself. So what do I want to talk about today? Today we're going to talk mainly about standards, the new standards, and their implementation. Actually, I would like to turn off my camera for this. What standards are we looking at exactly? So there are the new standards. Most of you already heard about that. We have new viewing conditions. That's the ISO 3664-2009 revision, which only came recently into place when the light booth manufacturers actually exchanged their bulbs like a couple of years ago. Then we have the new color measurement standard, which is the 13655, also the revision from 2009, which has this new measurement condition M1, which we're going to take a more close look at what that actually means for us. And we have a new offset printing revision from 2013. That's the ISO 12647-2. Which is at the same time also responsible for new characterization data sets, which are based on that new offset printing standard. Let's just talk later a little bit briefly about Gracol 2006, Gracol 2013, what's the difference, and so on. Then I would like to talk with you about a fairly hot discussed topic all the time, OBA proofing paper. Do I need a proofing paper which contains OBA, yes or no? I would like to discuss with you or show you our opinion on that, in which case you actually need an OBA containing proofing paper, in which case you don't. So you can make a more educated decision when you're talking with your customers, and you can explain better when they should use what. And further on, there's like an idea on how can all these things brought together in a future-proof implementation, where we want to talk here a little bit about exchange color spaces. What are exchange color spaces? What's the purpose of them, especially when you think about a common appearance? But let's start out with the viewing conditions. The most important part of that ISO specification, or the most important things in there, are the definition of the amount of light, the color and the quality of the light, as well as the surrounding areas. That's the main content of that ISO specification. So let's take a little bit deeper look into that. What does that mean? The amount of light is usually specified in lux. So they have now a definition in there. Somebody's pretty loud. Not really sure who that is. I'm gonna really quickly maybe mute. I don't know who that was. Leader? No, it wasn't leader. Okay.
Donna.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So the amount of light means basically how bright is the light. So we have in that ISO norm a specification of 2000 lux for critical color comparison. And we have 500 lux for practical color appraisal. What does that mean? It's 500 lux actually for soft proofing and 2000 lux for hard copy proofing, or hard copy proof comparison to a press sheet. That's something what is fairly important also to know. That means if you have one light box from a use.gti, doesn't matter, and you want to do both in that light box, you want to use it partially for soft proofing and you want to use it partially for hard copy proofing, you actually have to have a dimmable light box. Both light booth manufacturers actually offer that, but it's fairly important that you actually know that. Also that your normal typical soft proofing box, which only comes with 500 lux, is not suitable for a critical color appraisal of hard copy proofs. Very important to know and to keep in mind. I also looked a little bit of some normal examples. What does that mean? 2000 lux, 5000 lux didn't mean much to me in the beginning as well. So I needed to look up how bright is that really. So the examples are, it's like 1 to 2000 lux is the brightness of an overcast day at midday.
Hi, Laura. I'm good. How are you?
Um, so somebody needs to mute himself.
That's Donna. Just a second.
Okay. I don't even see Donna in the list. Oh yeah. Okay.
Just mute. Can you mute her?
Okay, I just muted her. Good. Okay. So then, so that's important. So it's like a normal overcast day at midday. It's like 2000 lux, and at sunset or in the twilight, somewhere sunset area, it's like more like 500 lux.
Biggie, how do you test a viewing booth to see whether it's, you know, in this range of brightness?
You could test a viewing booth with a light measurement device offered from different manufacturers. For example, GL Optics has a light measurement device which tests on those qualities. If you really want to have a measurement of it, but normally you can also read that up in the specs of the monitor itself. Of the viewing booth itself. So they usually come with a spec sheet which say how many lux they actually have in the luminance. But the best way is to use a light measurement device. I don't know how many of you guys already have light measurement devices. I don't have one personally yet, but I'm thinking of buying one exactly for this because I've stumbled over too many viewing booths out there in the field who are not according to the specifications.
Yeah, I would say most of them. And I've seen the GL Optics, but I have not used one.
I've used it already and I got trained on it. So I think it's actually very good usable. It's very easy usable light measurement device, but it's fairly pricey. So it's not something what every customer would buy, like an i1, but it's certainly something in the consulting area, which I think is a very helpful tool when you go to customers, when you want to talk with your customers, especially when if some of you guys have also large format customers. I don't know, in large format area, I stumble very, very often over self-built viewing booths, which are not even according to anything. And we can really easy show them what kind of a difference that makes. Also in the area of the color representation. So we're going to come to that in a little bit after the amount of light. So the amount of light, of course, is important. Why? For critical color appraisal, so bright. I often make this when I do this presentation in German. I make this comparison. At night, all cats are gray. That's like a saying in German. I don't know how you would say that in English. But it's like the darker it is, obviously, it's harder to make a critical color appraisal. So therefore, it should be fairly bright that you can do this. The next part, what is also important to know is the color of the light. For that, we should know that colors have a temperature. If you look at this charcoal barbecue grill here, we actually know that also from our normal experience. When we see that here, we have different colors of the fire or of the charcoal, and those different colors, we know that they are depending on the heat of that charcoal. So with a different temperature, the color actually changes, and also the other way around, basically. So every temperature in there has its own specific color. That's kind of important to know when we talk later about color of light. So we have the sun as our reference. Most of the time we use the sunlight as our reference because it's available all around the world. But the question is then, of course, what is the color of sunlight? Maybe not such an easy question. So you see here on in space, that's like that black line here. That's a measurement from NASA of the emission of the sunlight measured from space without our atmosphere as a filter in between. And in blue, we have same measurement also made from NASA on a certain point, probably somewhere in Florida, who knows, a measurement of the same sunlight filtered through the atmosphere. As a comparison, that red line is symbolic for 5,785 Kelvin. That is the temperature, and that's the temperature what charcoal would have if I would want to heat up the charcoal. It would have that spectrum at the temperature of 5,785 Kelvin, basically. Why is that sunlight now such an important factor? Of course, we always say we want to have a normal daylight as our reference. So the D50 daylight at 5,000 Kelvin is a little bit lower than that red line here, and that's kind of derived from the real remission curve of the sun. And it also represents sunlight at an overcast day during the midday. But very important, D50, that's something that a lot of people actually forget, and most of your customers will forget that because they buy really cheap $10, 5,000 Kelvin fluorescent bulbs in Home Depot or something like that. But the 5,000 Kelvin is literally just the temperature, which could be true when we follow here that gradient at any of those entire lengths. So that entire red line here is all 5,000 Kelvin. But the D50 is basically just a spot on this line of 5,000 Kelvin. So we see here when we look at what colors are represented there, you could find a Home Depot bulb, which is fairly yellow greenish, and it would have 5,000 Kelvin, and the next Home Depot bulb from a different manufacturer at 5,000 Kelvin would be already slightly purplish, magenta-ish. Still both are according to the measurements at 5,000 Kelvin, but none of those is D50. So if you want to have D50 bulbs, which actually have the correct color of the light, you should really reach out to your light booth manufacturer and not to your department store. Then why is that so important? I mean, I hope all of you have seen this picture before. I stole that obviously from Bob McCurdy's homepage. So we have the same image here. It's a proof in all these three different light conditions, and we would apply very different color corrections depending on that viewing light what we have here. So that's why it's so important to also explain that to your customers, because many of the customers are not aware of that fact, that light has such a huge influence. I hear I hear from so many customers, well, I can also just look at my proofs under my normal office light, or I'm just gonna take them and hold them next to the window. That's where I always look at my proofs. Obviously, that color of the light has such a huge influence on the proofs or on the quality of your color appraisal that you cannot judge it if you have a changing light condition. That's just not possible. I'm not saying it always has to be a D50 lighting. There are some special cases out there where they have special store light booths. So for example, I've actually seen that once from Starbucks. there is, on some conditions, you have Starbucks store lighting in light booth. So they actually judge it really under the real store lighting and not under a normed light. But obviously, if you want to produce for multiple different applications, it makes sense to judge it under a normed light or a standardized light, meaning a D50, instead of various custom light sources. Then furthermore, of course, we need to look at the quality of the light. What does that mean? Little excursion. Light is radiance. I think most of the people know this. So it's an electromagnetic radiance in a certain nanometer area. So somewhere between 400 and 700 nanometers of electromagnetic radiance, we have visible light. Our eyes can detect that radiance and transform that into a picture. What is outside of that area? In the near area around the visible light is towards the shorter wavelengths, the UV light, which in the near UV light tans our skin right now in the summer, makes us nice and tanned. And the a little bit farther away UV light makes us not so much tanned, but gives us skin cancer and other problems. And on the far side, on the long wavelengths, we have the infrared area, which is also often used for heat therapies and so on. And further on, after that, there are microwaves, radar, radio waves, broadcast. So those are the long wavelengths. And further down is X-rays and gamma rays. Important for that part is that we have actually here that UV area right next to the visible light, at the end of the visible spectrum, or let's say at the beginning of the visible spectrum, close to the purple bluish areas. Why is that important? Because of fluorescence. Fluorescence is actually a chemical reaction, which means a wavelength. Let's go back really quick. A wavelength, no matter where this wavelength is inside of the visible light, gets moved, so it gets absorbed in one area. Could also happen it gets absorbed at 500 nanometers, loses some of its energy and gets re-emitted in some other areas. So this can happen both in the visible as well as in the invisible area of the spectrum. When we now look at these real-life examples here, good examples are day glow or fluorescing spot colors. We have also Pantone colors. Some of them there are some oranges which are fluorescent. So what does happen actually when we now look at all this with a UV light or black light turned on, we see that some of these things are heavily fluorescing. So also interesting here, when you look at the paper white on the right-hand side, the paper white is really, really bright. They used to look really similar. And now the left-hand one, which does not contain optical brightness or a minimal amount of optical brightness, is very different in the appearance. So that's a normal fluorescence, and I think all of us are fairly familiar with this. But what does that mean in our proofing situations? So we used to have, with the old norm lights, meaning before used in GTI actually changed their bulbs, we had a really good match between the proof and the printing paper. So that would be normal offset stock on the right-hand side, and we would have a proof. Now the agency is exchanging the light bulbs, and this is what happened. So now we suddenly see a huge difference. As soon as they put the new bulbs in, the printing paper looks more blue, and Okay, I can mute David. No. And I don't know if it was David. The printing paper now looks blue, and the proof looks, in comparison to the printing paper, yellow. So those are the calls what I bet you guys hear all the time. I heard it when they changed the light bulbs a lot, and the people said suddenly all my proofs are not matching again. And they actually thought very often that suddenly the proof profile went bad. But of course, we know it's not the proof profile which goes bad. It's just the optical brightness which are illuminated now, and we see the difference there. So we should actually look into what can we do with this new situation now. I'm gonna come to that in a little bit. Yes,
Peggy,
please.
if everybody could just mute their microphones if you're not speaking, you can unmute yourself if you want to make a comment.
Yes, I
If
think
not,
that.
we're just going to mute everyone.
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay. I don't know if all heard you, but yeah. Okay. You let me.
You want to say it again? You want to say it again?
Yeah, maybe. So, if everybody could please mute himself. There's a green button on the right-hand side on your panel of GoToMeeting. While you're not speaking, we get a lot of feedback here. We hear a lot of other sounds. You can unmute yourself once you want to talk. And in case I can, you guys don't do this, we have to actually mute all of you, I guess. Yeah, exactly. Leader says, please mute yourself, everyone. Yes. Okay, maybe I'm gonna mute everyone besides of Dan. How about that? And Dan's gonna let me know in case somebody raises their hand. You can also, if you want to speak, raise your hand. No. Yeah, but I'm gonna mute you now. So, Dan, you're the only one who is still alive. So, yeah. So, let's continue. So, where were we? The quality of light. So we have actually also new quality of light measures in the new lighting standard of 2009. So they actually changed some values for the so-called metamerism index UV. So the quality of light is here defined as with the metamerism index and the color rendering index. The metamerism index describes basically the allowed delta E, the allowed color difference of 3 different sample pairs viewed under 2 different light sources, one time with and one time without UVA. So it's like the MI-vis. So it's the in the visual spectrum, in the visual area between 400 and 700 nanometers, and the UV is light with in the UV area, and there are some certain differences allowed between those 2 different light sources. Furthermore, there's a so-called color rendering index. So that's these 14 colors, what you see on the right-hand side. If they are illuminated correctly, they display in a certain color. And the first 8 colors here are mandatory to be matched according to a certain formula. The other ones, 9 through 14, are just informative. But with a good light measurement device, you will actually get the full report about the color reproduction capabilities of your viewing booth. You see from these pale colors here in the first 8, the norm or the specification focuses on the more neutral, more grayish skin tones area. So they're like more like pastel tones. Of course, they're like not really easy to catch, but they exclude very highly saturated areas. So between two viewing booths, especially from two different manufacturers, you have to know that it's possible that even if they pass all the viewing booth specifications, they could have a difference in the reproduction of, for example, a very strong red. Because that's allowed, because here that color rendering index is just informative. Even if you do not have a good reproduction with your viewing booth of the strong red, it would still pass. But that's why it's very important often also to look at those different measurements when you have, in case you have the measurements available from the different viewing booths, because that could actually explain also color differences you're experiencing. Why is that metamerism index on the left-hand side now so important? That's actually the most important part from the changes of the 2009 specification, because here the metamerism index UV, meaning the allowed difference in the UV area, is much, much smaller than it used to be. So in the 2000 standard, the former standard, it was basically allowed for a viewing booth to contain UV light, a lot of UV light, or no UV light at all. Which means that most old viewing booths actually did not contain any UV light at all, because they used plastic lenses in front of the bulbs, which acted like a UV cut filter, so they didn't have any UV light in there. So, and especially when you now think they did not have any UV light in the viewing area. Most of the measurement devices, especially used here in the United States, used to have also a UV cut filter in it. So you had a fairly good match between your measurement, so by measurement created profile, and your visual match. Because no UV light in the measurement, no UV light in your viewing area, seemed all pretty good. But why did they actually change this? The problem is actually when you think of the sunlight again. Sunlight has a lot of UV in it. So you always had this match under your viewing conditions, but you never have a match outside as soon as you go into a natural area. And that was just a part why they wanted to actually include a UV part into it to make it more similar, like a real life condition. Well, let's continue. Also important, I don't want to go too deep into this, but please make sure that the viewing areas and the surrounding items are as neutral as possible. I see very often things like this here, that they have really pretty pictures or green walls, or are wearing pink shirts while they're doing their color appraisal. Obviously not possible, should look like this. Because all these surroundings have a huge influence on the color appearance. So conclusion of that part is, of course, you need proper lighting. You cannot buy bulbs from the hardware store. Your actual norm light has more fluorescence than before, or your new norm light. And we have also the possibility that we do custom viewing conditions. So the meaning everybody in the chain then needs to agree to these custom viewing conditions is in some cases possible, like the Starbucks scenario. It is possible, but it's not recommended for everybody all the time, because it's very complicated to set it up throughout the entire chain. And in the end, make sure the environment is also correct. Let's go to the color measurements. So the changes, or what is actually containing in here. So we had in the old version from 1996, that's already quite old. We didn't have it here. Yes?
Lita has a question.
Oh. Okay. Bill Owen is trying to get on. Okay. He may. And somebody's coming.
I'll send him the invite again.
He can't hear me. But everybody else can hear me, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, good. Yeah. Bill, it seems for Bill as if he's not connected via voice over IP.
I had the same trouble, Biggie, and I had to switch the button from telephone to mic and speakers.
Yeah.
The default telephone, so that was what I did, and it worked then.
Okay. So, yes. Maybe then, maybe you can text Bill Owen to tell him that he has to click that button.
I'm doing that, yes.
Perfect. So, okay. 10 minutes for 40 slides. Good. I think we're going to do a little bit longer today, I hope. Leader says which button? There's a button to switch from telephone to mic. So let's continue. The old version of the measurement device specifications did not clearly define what kind of a light source has to be inside of that measurement device, which is obviously a little problem. And for the UV cut filtering, it allowed a UV cut filter, so there was already a definition for that, but it was not defined what does that mean. There's no wavelength definition, or there was no wavelength definition for when the filter should actually cut. I'm gonna show you a picture on that in a little bit, but that actually is a huge question. And it's very important to have that specified. So therefore, we have now also 4 measurement conditions. We have M0, which is the old no filter mode. So meaning an old I1, an old ISIS in no filter mode is that M0. Then we have M1, which is a new condition, which has a defined UV content close to D50. Very, very similar than the viewing booth. So our viewing booth has now a definition that it has to have a UV content like D50, and now our measurement devices have that same specification in there. Then furthermore, of course, we have a UV cut and a polarization. So let's look at that a little bit deeper. The M0, as I just said, the old measurement devices, it said that the light source should conform to illuminant A, meaning an incandescent light, but it does not have to. So it was fairly open what it could be. It did not define what amount of UV content should be in there. Meaning you could have a UV bulb in there, a lot of UV light, you could have no UV light at all. It was not really defined how much UV is there, meaning also how much will your optical brightness get excited from the UV light. And then all the old spectrophotometers are made like that. But of course, because of the no defined UV content, it's not really recommended as soon as you have optical brightness in either your proof paper or your press stock. But also important to know, all the old standards, ISO-coded V2, Gracol 2006, SWAP 2006, you name it, PSR, they are all measured and defined with M0, which also means you should verify them with M0, which means when you're measuring, when you're proofing out an ISO-coded proof, your verification should take place with an M0 standard, because otherwise you might get slightly different numbers than you actually would verify with an M0 device. So really quick, what does those light sources mean? That red one is the illuminant A. That's the remission curve of an incandescent light compared to, in white, the D50. We already see here in the blue area, the incandescent light has a much lower intensity than a daylight has. So illuminated with this, you will always measure less of the optical brightness and not as closely enough also all these differences of these paper shades. So that's why now it's recommended to have a light which is more closely to D50 and also with the UV content of D50 defined, so we can actually measure optical brightness with it as well. Then the new lighting or measurement condition M1 means it's like matching D50. We have this defined UV content, and all new and future measurement characterization data will be measured and defined in M1. We have that already here in the States since a year or longer, which is Gracol 2013, encoded and uncoded, as well as SWAP 3 and SWAP 5 of 2013. And all the different CRPCs 1 through 6 are M1, defined as M1. Therefore, very important, if you want to run these standards, you have to have a measurement device which can measure M1. And it makes of course, the most difference if you have a proof paper which does not contain any optical brighteners, or if you have a press stock which does not contain any optical brighteners, your M0 and your M1 will measure almost the same, basically the same. But as soon as optical brightness are in your stock, you will measure very different measurements with an M1 and an M2. We're going to see that in M1 and M0. We're going to see that in a second. Let's just run through like M2 and M3 really quickly because they're not so important anymore. M2 is the former UV cut, has now a very defined filter characteristic, how the UV light should be cut out. And the M3 is a polarization filter, and it also at the same time cuts away a certain amount of UV light. But let's look at those different measurement conditions. We have here the remission curve of an optical brightener containing paper with those 3 different measurement conditions. It's actually measured at the same time. Cool, i1 Pro 2 can do this at the same time. So it's the same spot. There's no measurement variance in there. It's literally just a filter variance. So we see M2, the blue line, does not show any influence of the optical brightness. But we also see that red line from M1 has a much higher excitement of the optical brighteners than the former M0 or the former no filter one. So when I transform that into an LAB view, it looks actually like this. So we have this formal measurement of -4 here, which -4b is already slightly blue. Maybe some of you know that most of the press stock what we had, what we measured, that was one of our complaints why we didn't like Gracol 2006 so much, because it was just too yellow, because most papers, most printing stocks are in the area of -4. But now that same paper measured with an M1 condition would already measure -5.6. So much bluer than it actually is. And at the same time, an M2 measurement with a UV cut filter would measure almost neutral. So we see here the spread, which has almost 2B of blue difference, of color difference, which is a not really crazy optical brighten stock. So we're looking here right now at a normal coated paper. Uncoated papers often have a much wider spread. So they often measure already with -8, -9 in M0 mode, and then -14, -15 with an M1. So the more optical brightness play an influence, the wider the spread between those measurement conditions will be. So why is that now important to actually measure that this way? So you see, just from these differences, it's important that you verify all your new proofing standards with that new measurement condition with M1. And they made that actually so it matches better what you see when you have a new viewing booth. That was the idea behind it, and we actually find that it also works pretty well. And of course, keep in mind, as soon as you don't have optical brightness anymore, it does not have an influence because the spread only comes from the variance of the optical brightness. Okay, can you address the difference between optical brightness in stock and optical brightness in coding? Yes, I can actually address that. So there are, that's a little excuse for what Lida is asking for. There are differences where the optical brightness can be located in a printing paper. In a printing paper, they could be in the base material. They could also be in the pre-coding layer. And there could also be just in the coding of a printing stock. High-end papers have it actually in all three different layers. Because a normal press stock would actually not yellow as fast because it's more protected against the UV light. Because optical brightness actually go bad. They break down with UV light. So if it's only in the top layer, only in the coding, you could have a really nice bright coding, but as soon as you have it on your window for half a day, then they already start breaking down and you will see a yellowing there. So the cheaper the paper, the printing paper, the more likely it is it's gonna change over time and it's gonna be very UV sensitive. And most proofing papers, in proofing papers, you also have to take care basically for the same also how the light fastness is therefore of all these proofing papers, because very important, if you buy a cheap proofing paper with optical brightness in it, the same thing could happen to you, and that means it could be that your proof goes bad within a day or two or a few days. Could happen with cheap paper. I would always take care that there are certain tests or specifications for that paper, that it has a normal, under normal controlled influences, meaning of course you don't put your proof on the outside, but you actually handle your proof normally. It should have the same proof stability of like 2 years than any other proof without or proofing paper without optical brightness. That's an important one. So yes, quick questions. Do I have to buy a new measurement device? Yes, if you're handling the M1 references, I would say that means yes for all of you in the United States, because everybody is starting to use Grackle 2013 now. So yes, please. Do I still need one which can measure M0? Yes, if your customers are using ISO-coded or any other standards of the old standards still. Which measurement devices support that? So we have these external measurement devices here, what you see, but we have also some internal measurement devices. So the ILS 30 from Epson supports that M1 measurement mode, and the ILS 25 from Canon, which is the measurement device inside of the Canon IPF 6450, also supports this. So let's go quickly to offset printing. We're running a little bit over time today. There are also some differences here. So the 12647-2 defines offset printing specifications. And we changed the following just recently. So they changed the paper types to more realistic paper types than they were before. They changed also the TVI curves, not so important here because most people actually still use do use G7 calibrations of their offset presses and don't do it with TVI curves. Then they have new target values for primaries. That's important also for here. And there is a method described to adapt the characterization data to changed paper tints. Same thing as they have described it in the Gracol specifications, or actually in the, what is that then, the TR21, right? Where they defined the same adaptation method for changing the paper tints. Also known as the Dave McDowell method. So let's look at the old paper types. We had these 5 paper types in the old specification, and you see here these white point LAB specifications. The old glossy coded was 95.0-2. Most people who actually looked into the Gracol specification before, that was exactly the white point of Gracol 2006 with no filter, therefore M0 measurement, and a white backing. Back then, they did not specify a fluorescence of the material, so you could have this 95.0-2 with a high amount of optical brightness on top of a really yellow paper, or you could have that with really nice bright bleached paper. It's like it was just not specified. And you see all these other values. Now with the new paper types, we have also a specification of the fluorescence, and we have adapted white points. But who still remembers now that a moderate amount of fluorescence, we had that earlier, we moved with a moderate amount of fluorescence from an M0 measurement of -4 to, at the same point, the same paper measured with M1 to a -5.5 or 6. Now we have here defined that is M1 measurement device, which is a -4 with a moderate amount of fluorescence. This paper here will not show much difference to the old paper before. It will just be a tiny amount brighter than the one before. So the difference is actually between paper type 1 and PS1 here really not that big. The most important part comes actually through that M1 measurement condition. And that's something what I personally don't find very optimal, because the spread, the real life spread of the real production papers is much bluer than what we actually see here. I'm going to show you that in a few slides, like really nicer. Then I'll quickly browse over the TVI curves. They also changed the TVI curves. We see the old one in red and we see the new one in blue. So they have like a higher amount in the quarter tones. And they changed like all the different curves A through E as well. Does anybody of you ever use TVI for an offset calibration? Dan, did you do that before?
Yes. Yeah, but not many times. I mean, the bulk of it, and pretty much what everybody does is, the G7 method.
Yeah, I assumed so. Okay, so just take care, new curves now, in case you actually stumble over that. But it's easy to read up on, or you guys call me before you go inside. Oh. Then there's also a possibility to change if your paper color does not adapt to those paper types described. There is a description of how to recalculate that. Cool thing, side note, if you have our color server contains a tool called GMG Paper Adaptation Tool, which can be pulled up from the start menu, which concludes all that. So you don't have to do it in Excel. You just load your gamut basically of your old one and measure in your new paper tint, or you type in your new paper tint and it does all the adaptation for you. Yeah, so those are the new characterization data sets. We have the new GrackHole 2013 coded and uncoded are depending on those two new paper substrates. Also, by the way, the primaries are also derived from that ISO 12647-2. So GrackHole is already conformant to this besides of the TVI calibration. And then we have soon FOGRA 51 and FOGRA 52 coming out, which is going to be in September or something like that. So, very important part, in my opinion, to understand. So we see here now an L over B display. So the x-axis here, this 0 to minus 16, shows 0 neutral till minus 16 very blue area. And we have L of 91 to 97. And we measured different production papers. Actually, we measured many, many hundreds of production papers and looked at them. And those are like the most prominent, which we actually picked out here. So we have in orange, normal coded production papers, and in, what is that, like pink, purplish, the uncoded production papers. And now you see in blue here the GrackHole 2006 target value. So you had a GrackHole 2006 here, which was supposed to represent your orange offset, sheet-fed offset production papers. Obviously not really a good pick. Same thing, by the way, for FOGRA 39 or ISO-coded. But it was actually even worse. For the FOGRA 47, the uncoded part was like all the way over here to represent all these purple papers. Not really perfect as well. So we already had a discrepancy. If I now look at these new definitions, the green one here is GrackHole 2013, and over here it's the GrackHole 2013 uncoded. My opinion, also not a very good representation of the whole cloud of typical production papers, which means you will have to very often do a paper adaptation to make a perfect match. A lot of times, if you just create a proof by the numbers, the customers will not be happy. Or if you do a separation by the numbers for your press, it will not be optimal. So in the GrackHole cases, very likely that you have to use a paper adaptation, either the normal Excel spreadsheet from Dave McDowell from the ID Alliance page, or from our paper adaptation tool to get a high quality output. Important. We see the FOGRA 51 and FOGRA 52, where they're coming out, they actually picked better values. They picked them a little bit more in the middle, but that is the main reason why FOGRA 51 and FOGRA 52 are delayed for over 2 years now. Because in the beginning they did a beta test with those green ones, meaning the same values as GrackHole has. They did this beta test for a year and they failed in the praxis. So the printers in Europe did not accept those profiles. So they had to go back to the drawing board and had to create data sets which actually fit better into that area. And now they seem to get accepted. Fun fact on the side, that the guy who created that data set is Hanno Hofstadt from GMG. Now, meanwhile, we're a little proud of that. So, yeah, now you see that's like the areas how they can. Yes?
I wasn't aware of that. And so the paper adaptation, does that happen through, via in a plate curve or in a press profile, or in an inkjet like media profile?
So you actually almost 2 out of those 3. Yeah. So if you want to do that paper adaptation correctly, you should separate your files already to that new corrected printing condition, so to speak. So you change your characterization data set, you change GrackHole to this new adapted paper adapted GrackHole. That means you should re-separate all your files for this new area, because let's not think about the proof, let's just think about the press. You separate your files, and if you separate them for bluer paper, you're gonna put less blue ink in certain areas. Otherwise, if you separate it for the Grackhole 2013 as you have it right now, often your skin tones will look, your girls will look a little bit sick. So they feel a little bit too blue, too greenish, and people start retouching about that. So that's important that you have your separation correctly for the new adapted paper tint. That's what our paper adaptation tool does. But if you want to prove that then also and see what's happening there, you would have to create a custom proof profile for this new custom condition. Or no matter if it's hard copy or soft proof, same thing. With our adaptation tool, we try to keep the common appearance. So because it's very often not possible very early in the chain to even know that. So you cannot create a proof for this adapted paper condition because you do not know what is the color of my paper later while you're creating your proof. So you do a proof with Grackhole 2013, but then you should take care that your reseparation is with a common appearance approach, meaning you move the areas, but you still try to keep everything as close as possible without changing really any of the U angles, so that you don't have the feeling that you have to go retouching again after that has happened. So that's like some of the things what we actually build in there. But of course, if you want to have 100% security, you would have to create also a proof profile after the new recalculation of your characterization data set.
In an ICC world, that would be the same profile in Photoshop as it would be as reference profile in an ICC environment, right?
Yes. So you would also have to change your ICC profile.
And that would come from a measurement specifically from the media that you were targeting?
Yes. Yeah. So assume you're printing with that -16 over here. The ID Alliance also offers that Excel spreadsheet where you can load in the normal Grackhole 2013 target values or the characterization data, and then you can type in your new paper tint, so your new LAB value, and it's going to recalculate this with a transformation. The Excel spreadsheet is very linear in its approach. We have more, for us, it's like more a smoother transition. I personally find the Excel spreadsheet always a little bit harsh, especially in the highlights. Yes. So there's like these two different possibilities to do this, but yes, you have to actually recalculate that and then recreate from that new characterization data set a new ICC profile.
And is that your tool available to us?
That's available to every customer who has a color server. Comes with the color server since last version already.
Perfect. Thank you.
Very welcome. So, yes. Yeah, they wanted to change it a little bit more to get away from that yellowish Grackhole to a bluish print, but it's like it's still a little bit questionable, as we just said. So the question is now also, do we need optical brighten proofing papers? Can be very helpful. Some of you guys, I see some of you on there which already tried that out. Let's maybe jump to the optical brighten proofing paper. Again, yes, of course, GMG is offering that. The semi-matte, it has the same quality as our proof paper semi-matte 250 without optical brightness. We have now a version with optical brightness. So, but everything else is exactly the same surface, same quality, same everything. The challenge was to find a good light fastness, something what is very stable. To find a good balance of the fluorescence level. So how many optical brightness should we bring in there? And to have an optimal paper tint to cover as much of the new standards as possible. But that was necessary for a bunch of the new standards. So some of you already have used that. And I think LIDA has that already in stock. I assume so at least. It's recommended. It's not absolutely necessary for Gracol 2013, but I would personally recommend it. I personally like it better, and it seems also my customers like it better, the Gracol 2013 on the OBA proofing paper. So when we now look at those two different comparisons again, that's exactly the graph what I just showed you. I'm going to lay them on top of each other so you see both the uncoded and the coded in one image. Now we're going to see here in gray, that is the gamut of the old paper, the non-optical brighten proofing paper. And we see the Gracol is here. It looks as if it's like exactly in there. It's not exactly in there. It's a little bit on top of the gamut. It still would pass the Gracol certification, but it's slightly outside. But we have now that blue one is the gamut of that new Gracol 2013, of that new OBA paper, which covers easily the Gracol 2013. Looks really nice. You also see that it's going to cover like a lot of the other optical brighten proofing papers. It's a pretty good paper here. The only areas where we still have sometimes colors sticking out are when they're really highly optically brightened. Like for example, a McCoy uncoded is somewhere out here that sticks out. It doesn't stick out too far, but it sticks out a little bit. So we're right now thinking of maybe getting another even more optical brighten proofing paper, but the more optical brightness you have in a proofing stock, the more difficult it's going to be to handle for the light fastness. Of course, we have all the necessary certifications for it. No problem. And you can store it like all the other proofs. That was fairly important for us. Yeah, now let's maybe look at some other exchange color spaces. The idea of exchange color spaces is maybe not bad. That's what CRPC 1 through 7 was the idea for. In my opinion, there are too many. That's also why right now they only released CRPC 3, 5, and 6 for SWAP, Gracol, and Gracol Uncoded. And are slow with releasing the other ones, because if you have too many different color spaces in the mix, you just confuse a bunch of your customers. I would not bring in too many variables usually, because we want to have an exchange color space. As we just saw, even those 7 exchange color spaces seem not to be enough to cover our different printing papers, and they already recommended to make a paper adaptation with each of them. So I don't need to have a base from 7 where I can multiply into 700 later, depending on how many stocks I use. Just makes it too complicated. So I would always keep it to a smaller color space, or a smaller selection of color spaces. But what's important here? Important is that an exchange color space has the characteristics of a printing color space. But I can actually have an exchange color space which has a very different size than what I'm going to print later on. If I look at those 3 comparisons here, we have on the top a coded paper, we have an uncoded in the middle, and a newspaper on the bottom. Those 3 color spaces are hugely different, but we still would say, when we look at those 4 colors, we would still say they are very nicely aligned. So I understand as a customer that I will not have an absolute match between those colors, but I can understand that there is a relative match between them. So I have a common color appearance, and that's exactly the approach, but we should more look at what we want to do in the future. So we should only, if absolutely necessary, do this absolute approaches where we recalculate everything already in very early stages. When I think of design retouching stages, I do not need to retouch for every single paper. I only need to retouch one time with the idea of a printing color space in the background. So I should view it with a printing color space, but then my color conversions should actually take care that I get a color conversion from my retouched image to my final output color space with taking into consideration how I wanted to have the intent, how it should look like, but on the smaller color space, meaning with a common appearance model. And that's actually what we are trying actually to do. We have a common appearance model created in our color master, which balances out the media white point. We still are, so that means we basically do a relative colorimetric rendering intent on the media white point, but then we actually do an absolute colorimetric rendering intent in the middle of the color space, in the gray areas, in the skin tones, where it's super important. And then we do some kind of a perceptual rendering intent, but only in the highly saturated areas. So we kind of squeeze that together. So we still take into account the entire printer gamut, but take care on all these 3 things. So that's like basically our color master approach, how we can ensure that you have a common appearance over all different printing standards and over all different printing paper types. That's kind of what we do. So therefore, we can use now a proof, a color, so-called color master proof, which could be soft proof, which could be hard copy proof, as your image, as your reference, and you retouch on this, and then later you don't need to take care on all retouching steps for all different printing conditions anymore. And that's how they actually realized the IKEA model with 39 printing standards on more than 50 printing substrates at over 40 printers around the world, and still continue having a common appearance over all different types. So therefore we get here basically what they always wanted to have, coming from one idea to one printed result.
Can you go back to that other slide for a second?
This one?
Yeah, that's just insane.
Yeah,
So
right?
IKEA actually did this for all these different standards, for all these different printers.
Yes,
And
IKEA had
these are shops
two,
or something. No, are
they,
other
they,
vendors.
yeah, they had more than 200 retouchers in Sweden, which retouched for every single combination separately.
What a
Because
massive project that is.
yeah, because why is that so important? They actually started that in the beginning. They didn't do this when IKEA started in Europe. That's like, oh god, I was a very little kid when that happened. But they had the problem. They had a ton of returns from especially all the, you know, the gray and the slight purplish and it's like not so, more like neutral area couches and stuff, because people saw it in the catalog and ordered it or went to the store, bought it, and it was like completely different. So they had a huge amount of returns. And then they started doing all that retouching for that. So they have actually the correct color appearance over all these different things. But then they came to us, and that's now 6 years ago, I want to say. I was also still in Germany at that time. they came to us with a huge delegation of people from IKEA, and they just ask us for help, and they ask, can you do something for us, because it's insane what we're doing here. And yes, so now they're only retouching one time for all these different standards. Everything else is automated.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. So now we are just 25 minutes over. Does anybody else have maybe questions? Oh, actually, I'm gonna unmute all of you now. So.
Finally, I can say something.
Oh, hey Dan.
I've been talking to the computer the whole time. No, I'm just kidding. Thanks. This is a good presentation, Biggie. I really appreciate you kind of pulling us together, and Lita and Dan.
Thank you.
I have a question that kind of relates, starting at the press room and going backwards. Most of the press systems that I am aware of are all M0, and so we have some people that are buying the exacts, but most people will have the inlines, right? And they're all M0.
Yeah.
So what do you suggest in terms of setting up proofing? Would you set up proofing for 2006 because that's what the measurement device is on press? Or would you set up proofing for 2013 knowing that their press is not going to be measured?
I would probably still set it up for 2013. Oh, hello. Okay. Sorry. Okay. I'm gonna unmute you in a second again after I said my sentence. So I probably would still set them up for 2013, especially since most of the pre-press companies now start also switching to 2013, and 2013 matches actually fairly good with the new, or not perfect, but matches better with the new printing papers than the 2006. The 2006 still looks a little bit yellow compared to the 2013. So I assume you would be easier there, but of course the verification there could be kind of hard. So you as a consultant could actually set them up this one time with a 2013 and then measure them in their reference values with their M0, or tell them the reference values, what they should measure, if they then would validate on that specific paper with an M0. But of course, those target values for the verification would have to be captured every time new for every paper, because that's now very much depending on the amount of optical brightness in the stock. Does that help you, Dan?
Yes,
So you're saying I'd still set them up as 2013 for proofing, but use reference values that are from 2006
No.
because they're M0? No.
No, I would. You have to be consistent, so everything has to be done 2013. But you would probably have to measure them in. So print it out with 2013, but then you have to generate.
No, they just put like
Who is this? Can
not really
anybody?
necessary.
Art
Yeah, just see what's the
Ah,
there
yeah,
you go.
yeah. Okay. But you would have to create target values for them on press. So on their stock, it's then the question, what is the target value what they have to reach with an M0? And that means you can only actually generate that with an M1 and M0 double measurement device. So you as a consultant would have to measure that in one time when you're going there with an, so set everything up with an M1 device, and then at the same time measure in what it would measure in M0, and that's what they could run in production later on as their new target values with the M0 device what they have.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Shoot, if no one else is going to ask something, I'll ask something.
Well,
Yes, please.
I have one too. So go ahead, Dan.
In terms of the exchange color spaces, would you be considering using device links? So assuming like files come in US web coded and do a device link to the exchange?
When you say exchange color space, you mean
CRPC,
hmm?
CR, like the CRP or the CRP, whatever the color
Yeah,
exchange.
CRPCs. Yeah. I mean that's like basically just Grackle and so on. I mean I'm of course I'm GMG, so I highly recommend custom device link technology profiles, which would be found in Color Server. Now, why do I usually, in most of these cases, recommend device link profiles? Because with a device link profile, you have always a better control over separation. Of course, it works over the ICC way as well. It works, but you do not have as much control over the separation. So I believe in the device link technology approach for this purpose on that control. But if you do not have a device link technology handy, you can also do this with ICC.
So my thought process is that you get files in that are typically US web coded. Sometimes they're Grackle. Most people don't know the difference. And then to use like a device link to kind of get it to a reference space that then is appropriate for the kind of print process.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes in as US web coded, that raises usually anyways a flag for me, to be honest. Because
This is what you see in the field, of course.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but every time when I find that, then I know, okay, they're sitting there and they don't know anything about color management.
Exactly.
Yeah, but then the next question is, did they ever have a consultant in-house? Yes or no? That's kind of my next question, because if they had, maybe they have their soft proofing settings and so on set up correctly. So maybe they really see what they're doing with that US web coded and they mean that. So that's their intent. So they saw it before, that's their intent, that's what they want to have. But very often they don't even have the soft proofing setups set in Photoshop. So they don't even mean US web coded. So what they actually meant was actually more something along the lines of Grackle. So that's always like the question, what did they really want to do with this? Because maybe if you run it through a device link or run it through a transformation from US web coded to Grackle, if you would do it correctly with a normal color transformation, you keep that intent of like not being like very colorful on that Grackle. So you transform it that it's just printed on a different print condition, or did they actually not mean to do this? Did they actually mean to have it highly saturated? That's always a tricky one, honestly, because it really depends on where they made the mistake, I find.
I mean, most of them just don't understand the nuances that they just, they just go blindly into it, and then, the print provider, whatever decisions they made, I don't care. I'm gonna go blindly this direction. I mean, that's what I always find. It's like the blind leading the blind.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this example of this IKEA project is just nothing that I think anybody that I know of in North America or the U.S. would do or is doing. I don't know. I mean, the fact that everybody is so far off and this is a million miles away is just, I mean, how many of the other consultants that are on here are targeting 2013 with their customers, have updated their lighting, have updated all their measurement devices, have switched them over to, OBA proofing medias, are doing the white point adaption for, all the reference data sets or profiles. How many?
Biggie, I have another question, if I might.
Yeah. Since well, give Dan a second that the other people can answer. Dan, Dan, you can answer that maybe also. Did you ever? How many customers of yours have all the new standards already implemented?
Which Dan?
You.
Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
No. I mean, like that's the thing. It's just they're all blind about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I bring it up to every printer that I'm in, whether, and, they just kind of say, oh, yeah, all right, well, my printer hasn't told me I need to do that, or the printing company says, yeah,
Or it's
I don't think
their deal.
that's
They
not
have
going
to.
to happen.
Yeah.
So my question, I'm sorry I'm taking hold of the conversation here, but my question
Alright.
is it seems kind of like I attribute these things like a cake, like you can't go half-ass into this because what I feel is the early adopters that have said, oh, let's switch over the lights, they've been bitten on that. Like you have to switch over your lights, you have to switch over your proofing stuff, you have to get the right device, and then things will work. But if you just do your lighting and don't get the right device or don't switch out your proofing, you're going to get a different cake here, and this is not going to work. So you got to be committed to do all of it, not some of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I feel has happened is that people are slowly doing it, but they're running into problems because they don't understand, what the cake is supposed to taste like or what it's supposed to look like.
Yeah.
It's lighting, measurement devices, it's proofing stuff, it's reference spaces, and it's somewhat almost like the version 2, version 4 ICC profile thing. You're not going to get a benefit of version 4 unless you have everything version 4 in your workflow. If you have one that's version 2, then the whole workflow goes to Putski. But it doesn't work. But people don't understand that nuance that you have to do all these things together, and then you get the benefit. So I think that's why I haven't seen, and maybe other people have not seen either, is that this hasn't all kind of gelled together. That we're seeing, the Holy Grail here.
Yeah. I mean, I see more and more customers actually from our customer base here, just from a support volume, what I'm getting in here. A lot of people are switching to Grackle 2013 or want to. But many do not understand it. So that was, so I have to educate my customers a lot what Grackle 2013 even means. ID Alliance did, in my opinion, what's something really, really bad with naming also the new ID Alliance control strip also 2013. Because I would say 60% of my customers think that they're automatically printing Grackle 2013 when they select the ID Alliance control strip 2013 as a reference, as a control strip. So that's a problem. Then they don't know what that means. The next step what they stumble over is they don't have the measurement device to actually verify it. And yes, there's like a lot of work around there and a lot of potential for you consultants to actually make money on that, I would say. Because everybody will need help. I don't think there is a customer out there who understands really the entirety of what belongs together. That's where you guys come into place, or where these type of webinars are very often extremely helpful.
Yeah, Lee made a couple of comments. I don't know if everybody saw them that, the new ISIS is helping, and the new Exact, which are just been released relatively, recently.
Yeah.
That that'll help the implementation.
Yeah.
But still, like all these old presses that have the inline, they're all M0.
Yep.
So, I hope someone's considered that besides me.
And as far as I know, X-Rate still doesn't have an M1 capable Spectre drive or Spectre jet, or excuse me.
That's what I'm saying. There's no IntelliTrax or Spectre drive that does M1 that I can see.
Yeah.
Yeah, handhelds only.
Right.
Well, no, that's not true.
Mm.
Inspector Drive,
No,
Inspector Jet don't. I mean, I know IntelliTracks and EasyTracks don't.
yeah.
See, I thought the Spectre Drive and Spectre Jet were M1, but maybe it's only the
I don't know.
Spectre Den.
It's just a Spectre Dens as far as I'm sure.
Yeah, Spectre Dens.
Okay.
So, one of the things that I've had the opportunity to do that some other people haven't is I bought one of those little light measurement devices, and as you would expect, the lighting's all over the place. I mean, it is a mess in just about every single place that you go into.
Yeah.
There's not one place that's would certify for 2009 lighting or whatever. You know,
Wow.
it's not one of them.
Yeah, out of all the graphs you were showing, Biggie, I thought one would be interesting would be, a cross section of printers, and how all their viewing stations, compared to one another and to the standard.
Okay, but that makes like as many variables as we have here on that IKEA model.
Exactly. We should get going on this project. It's going to take us a while.
Yeah, exactly. So we have then 40 standards with 50 printing substrates with 40 different measurement conditions and 50 different lighting conditions. Yeah. Actually, yes, that actually the lighting topic gets more and more a problem. I actually see, but I also see that as a potential. That's why the same way than you have that thing. Then I wanna buy the same thing. That I can actually show that to every customer, because it's just unbelievable how often I stumble over homemade light booths.
Oh yeah, is it?
Yeah, I mean they really believe they can plug that together from Home Depot. And yeah, so
The bulbs fit. The bulbs fit, so it works.
exactly. And it's, you see, it turns on when I switch to flip. Yeah, flip the switch. Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, thank you so much, Biggie. If he has any other questions, we'll let.
Yeah.
We're already about 40 minutes behind.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
thank everybody. Have a great day.
Yeah. Very welcome. Thank you for everybody for your interest. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Biggie.
Yeah. Bye.